All right. Well, hi, Dr. Lisle.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm just fine. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. I've been thinking about. I took a few notes in sort of preparation for our conversation today, and your story is an exceptional one. You know, even in the space of those of us that work in weight loss and personal transformation. So I'm delighted to have a chance to talk to you more at length about your entire journey and your process and the things that you have noticed and learned along the way. I think it's going to be valuable for people to listen to this. It's going
Well,
to be great.
I sure hope so. That's why I went public with my story was for that specific purpose, which is to help people
Yes.
and to yeah, give back because I was certainly impacted by stories as well as content in the not just the weight loss community, but the plant-based weight loss community. And your resources have been certainly an important part of my transformation. And I know that they have helped thousands and thousands of people as well. And so I'm thrilled to have you here, Dr. Lisle. And I'm thrilled to introduce you perhaps to people who maybe haven't ever heard of you. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to start by giving a little bit of a background about your work, which is that you are the author of The Pleasure Trap with your friend and colleague in that venture, Dr. Alan Goldhamer. And for people in the plant-based world, they know that resource very well because it is a seminal piece. And I thought it might be nice to hear from you a little bit about your work and your background that might relate to the task at hand today.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I'm a psychologist and just a general psychologist that I got sort of hornswoggled into trying to help my friend Alan, who is trying to help people make changes in their diet and lifestyle as a young doctor. And so that became, sort of a focus of a lot of people that I was treating at Alan's facility, True North Health Center. And so that just grew into what finally became a book about that problem. And The Pleasure Trap is the story of how the modern environment, particularly around food, has sort of created food on steroids, as it were. Sort of super normal stimuli is what we call it. And that super normal stimuli lures people in an addictive like fashion into a trap where what tastes best, that used to be the best thing to do in nature is your feelings are things that you're supposed to follow. And if we follow our feelings with respect to the tastiest food, we actually wind up following into essentially a manufactured trap. And so that's the story of the pleasure trap. And we can talk more about that later. But I, uh, I was actually wanting also to hear from you so that people could acquaint themselves with yourself, that a bit about your career independent of your weight loss journey. So I know you're Dr. Tania. Tell people about what that means and sort of what your career and what your background is about, because I think it's really interesting.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I was a career educator in the K-12 system for 33 years and worked for 24 of those years in the classroom as an English teacher. And some of that background will come out today as I launch into a new branch of education. Along the way, I also became very interested in educational leadership. And so the last 9 years that I spent in K-12 education was as an educational leader at the district level and then at the state level, where I was involved in gifted and talented leadership for Minnesota, including president of that organization, Minnesota Educators of the Gifted and Talented. And then I also did leadership at the national level in various ways around gifted and talented education. And that all launched me to a new career in where I work with a math curriculum company outside of, well, it's in San Diego and California, and that is the art of problem solving. And so I've had kind of a varied way here. And probably the one thing I would add to that is that I did a lot of doctoral work around reflective processes as well as transformational, what it meant to engage in transformational learning. And so when I got serious about my own health and weight loss, I really drew upon some of that background in developing that. And I think all of those aspects of my life really are part of what drew me to go public with my story, was that I could draw on different facets of each part of my work as an educator and as an educational leader.
Yeah, this is fabulous because of all the people I've run into in the plant-based space, we have people that come from such varied, very varied places where they wandered in the door. So obviously, MDs were a major people first, and chiropractors and naturopaths, and then nurses and nurse practitioners and people like that, and chefs. You know what I mean? So there've been a number of chefs, and but I don't know that we've had a career educator. So someone who's actually really at an elite level in that. So I know partially because I've looked at a little bit of your stuff. I know a little bit about what's coming into this space from you. It's going to be a little different because we aren't educators. I'm a psychologist, so I talk to people. So I'm not set up to be thinking in terms of an educational system, yet that's a huge part of what this process is an educational process. So you've got a bunch of doctors aren't trained as educators, taught as doctors. So it's great to have you here, and I'm looking forward to it. I know it's going to be sort of a large, an evolutionary process for you. You're going to go through the development of essentially ways to try to educate folks. But I know I'm in early knowing about you. And so I'm going to be it's going to be fun to watch what it is that you put together out of all the little pieces we've strewn all over the floor. So all good.
Yeah, well, and I'm excited to have you as part of this adventure. Right now, we actually don't know each other all that well, although we have established a working relationship, which is what brings us to this point. And I'm looking forward to this particular transition as we work through some really important ideas that are part of really the two sides of this fight. You come at this with a huge body of work in terms of not just the research-based and the immersion in this whole community for years and years and years, but also with the psychology of what it takes to go on this journey. And I don't have any of that work that comes with, I've worked a little bit with people now. I've done some coaching and some work with it. I've been observing a lot. And a lot of what I have developed is coming out of the field of education, as well as studying myself when I was going through the process, as well as looking at that while I was listening to other people's stories as well, which I think brings in my English teacher background.
Yes.
So these are going to be, I think, really interesting complementary pieces of information as we go through this process of visiting.
Yes, all good. Could you tell me a little bit about your history with weight loss, food? Just tell people a little bit about sort of your story in this whole area.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that it's been a lifelong struggle for me, like so many people. I will say that if I go into my childhood, I felt obese before I was obese. I think that there was a period of foreshadowing that started probably when I was in about third grade, where I started to feel fat. And that was the language I had for it then. Even if I wasn't overweight or obese yet at that point, but I think it really comes back to the way that food made me feel. And third grade would have been the time when I was starting to have a little bit of independence, going, walking to the local gas station and picking up potato chips with a friend or candy. But potato chips are, I have hundreds of triggers, but potato chips probably are the top of the trigger list. And so I can remember even in third grade, if I got potato chips, it would be hard to stop eating them. If I got candy, it would be really hard to start eating them. And I think I started to know that there always was going to be another size bigger, and that those sizes were going to become mine over time. And so that really is a little bit about my childhood. When I was a teenager and early adulthood, I went in and out of being overweight and obese, and had a much better handle on it than I had for most of my adulthood, primarily because when I became a parent, I think I really lost energy for the fight. And I was exhausted, juggling a full-time career, which I loved, juggling a family, which I loved. But because of the way hunger works in me, and I use your word, biology or genetics.
Yeah.
I think both of them are really important words that are part of who I am as a person. It made the fight really hard. And I can look at my life and see periods of resignation where I just was in long periods of inaction that were always marked by the intention to start tomorrow. And there was never a day that I didn't have the idea of starting tomorrow in my mind. And then there was a period where I tried to take action as my kids got a little bit older. I went really in and out for years of really important learning work that set the stage for success at long last, which I finally was able to get my arms around in my early 50s. And it's been a journey since then. So, and at times it would be very easy to be hard on myself for not finding this sooner. But if I really think about what I know now, I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the knowledge, and I didn't have the time to follow through to be able to do the learning that I needed to do. And I think some of the resources would have been very hard for me to find as well. So there's grace in that.
That's super. That's a really, really good story. Very important because, in talking over the years with Chef AJ, I've talked to her about. I usually say, this is a very difficult journey. It's more problematic than people appreciate. If you read a book by a fine author, Colin Campbell or John McDougall, you may look at the information and say, yeah, that's what I need to do. But there's a big difference between recognizing what direction to go and actually executing on it. It's much more fraught with pitfalls than we see coming. And one of the things, what I've said to AJ is it takes an unusual personality and unusual motivation. But there's actually a third thing, and that is that it also takes the space. It takes the time and energy resources. Like that's a third thing in the equation. So, you always had a diligent, well-organized personality. I mean, that's in you. And you always had the motivation. And many people listening have both of those things. Like the people that are in this space, our space, are unusually motivated or they wouldn't be here. And they have the personalities that they've got usually a lot of conscientiousness, but they may not have the space to do it. And so it's interesting that this took you, in other words, you were sort of grinding on this for a huge part of your life, kind of getting ready, making efforts, stubbing your toe, getting tipped over. And then finally you arrive at a moment where everything is finally in alignment and things start to work. So super interesting. Could you tell us a little bit? Your journey involved plant-based nutrition. how did that happen? And, tell us about how that eventually played into, success that you've had.
Okay. I think to do that, what I'm going to do is share my screen here,
All
and
right.
I'm going to launch into it via pictures and via my title here. Can you see my
Yes.
screen?
Yeah. Great.
So, as I think about this, this is where I can't really separate Tania, the educator, from the story. And so, on this, I've got some of the plant-based nutritional things that have been transformative for myself. And part of what I did differently when I got to the point of being successful on this is I really knew from all my work as an educator, I had to drill into why. Why does this happen? Why am I obese? Why do I struggle so much with my weight? And why do I fail? And I really wanted to get my arms around that failure. And so I committed to following this where it went. And
Mhm.
I thought I had a lot of answers at that point, because I entered about 4 years ago into the space, knowing that I was addicted to food, but not really knowing what that meant. I didn't realize that was going to be a starting point. I thought it was more of an ending point that would lead me to success, but it turned into a starting point. And part of my discovery really is about eat when hungry and all of the different factors that make that really difficult when I think about my hunger drive, and when I think about what it has taken to uncover what it means to be hungry. And I started using the phrase pretty early on with my self-talk that I was going to drill into hunger to understand it as part of the why. I had no idea what an epic journey that was going to be. And this is where my English teacher self comes out a little bit too, because there are probably, former students that will react in horror to me bringing in an epic hero at this point. But an epic hero is someone who goes through a long journey and battles supernatural forces. And there are larger than life battles and struggles. There are larger than life victories, and it's an ongoing journey. And in so many ways, that's really what this problem is about. It's an incredibly complex problem. And for my own self, understanding what language I got from some of your work, but understanding my hunger drive has been at the center of that. And it has been a multifaceted, complex journey that has taken me several years to unravel and to figure out. And just to give that sort of context, I think it's important to show a before and after picture.
Yeah.
And I personally have decided not to use numbers associated with it because to me, then it feels like that centers something that you call an ego trap, which I think is important to share in just a moment with our audience. But it really was for the purposes of my own health and my own long-term sense of wellness that I have chosen not to use numbers, because this really isn't about the number on the scale. And in all reality, a healthy weight for me is going to mean a range that I bob in and out of. And so I didn't want a specific number associated with my narrative, because I didn't want to send conflicting messages in my story. And I also wanted to protect myself. And I thought this might be a really good time to talk a little bit about the ego trap, because that plays a role in people's success and failures in profound ways on this journey.
Yes. And the ego trap is a situation where the bar gets set too high. And all of us know what that feels like. In other words, if we think we can maybe write a pretty good paper and maybe get a B plus, but we've got a parent saying, well, you should be able to get an A, we can feel the pressure of not being able to live up to the expectation. And so one of the things we have to watch out for in the pursuit of any goal is to really make sure that expectations of other people or ourselves don't start running out too far ahead of where we have any confidence. So but this is we see people if they were 60 pounds overweight and they lose 30, and now suddenly everybody around them is saying, hey, you're looking good. In other words, we can't wait for you to lose the next 30. And they can feel the expectation that they're supposed to be able to execute on this. That, because they don't have confidence that they necessarily can, but they've got expectations that they should be able to, they won't try. The ego trap is where you essentially go on strike so that you don't look like a fool who couldn't live up to expectations. We intentionally don't try so that we can both tell ourselves and others, hey, I'm not really trying. This is you actually mentioned this earlier, in this interview where you talked about how you went through times where there's a little procrastination dynamic, like I'll start tomorrow. That in the famous phrase that comes out of alcohol addiction is, I'll start tomorrow, i.e., don't judge me today, the fact that I'm not starting today because I haven't really tried yet. I'm not really trying. I will try tomorrow. And that could be a perpetual cycle of, abdicating the effort and the risk that comes with trying and then maybe failing. And so that's why we try hard if we're trying to do counseling well with people, we're not a rah-rah cheerleader. We're trying to be very realistic and very protective of people's egos, because those are fragile things when it comes to, putting yourself towards a journey that you would really want to succeed. And everybody thinks you should, like it's just not that hard, when actually it's much harder than people realize. And we may experience failures. And when we do, we can't catastrophize and just quit. So that's why we don't have numbers. That's why I don't like to be talking numbers with people or expectations for how fast they're going to lose weight or anything like that. It's like we focus on the process, not the outcome. Our job is to do the process well and not worry about what the outcome is. Our job is to focus right there. And, I know you did that. We can see the spectacular result, but what was really spectacular was you keeping yourself focused and just doing the same things on day 300 that you did on day 3. And it's doing the same things today, long after you've achieved the success, to just continue to do those things religiously is the way that you basically support your success. Superb. That picture that tells, that's 1,000 words.
Yeah, and that's always true.
Yes.
The whole range that I've done since I lost the weight, I've always lost half my weight. And
Yes.
And that is an accurate part of the story that I think keeps me from some of the traps that you just described. And as I reflect over my journey too, I see the ego trap as part of that pattern of inaction where I resigned myself and created a whole sense of there's a whole series of distortions that go with, justifying the addiction or some of the tricks the human mind, or at least my human mind, plays on me regarding my weight. And so, having ways to keep my distortions in check and to double check my distortions to try to find what's accurate and what's healthy has been really an important part of my journey too.
Yeah, fabulous. The how did you come about deciding to share the story? This is it's enough to live it and to do it. I mean, that is enough. But tell us a little bit about that. What has now sort of motivated you? How did that emerge?
That's a really great question because it seems very strange how early into my success I knew that I was probably going to share my story. And I would say it was probably 4 or 5 months into my success. And I was in a really complex, tangled mess of emotions and processes and confusing time. And I was trying to make sense of a lot of things that were going on. All of it was complicated by the fact that it was in the middle of COVID or toward the beginning of COVID as well. And so there was a sense of isolation that was naturally part of many of our experiences as people during that time. And I was certainly experiencing that sense of isolation. And so I was looking for resources around the complexity of the process. And I got frustrated because I felt like there weren't enough things that were getting at the multifaceted work that I was doing and that I knew I was doing because of my background as an educator and the insights that I had into reflective processes that come out of my experiences. And so what I ended up doing at that point is I remember deciding, well, don't look for resources anymore, start studying yourself and see if you can make sense of what you're going through from your own perspective. And I really entered into a space of curiosity then to be able to name what types of actions I was taking and what types of complexities I was facing at the time. And I wasn't doing it for the purpose at that time of sharing it, but I kept thinking like, this is worthy of sharing. This is a process that I wish I knew more about. And I just, I'm sure that it is in different places, and I got bits and pieces as I was seeking resources constantly on the internet during that time. But I think every person who does this has an individual pathway too. And so as an educator, I just kept thinking about there was a feeling in it that there was something that included me systemically, but could be larger than me, and that eventually I would want to probe that. Didn't do it actively for a while, but I did choose to share my story because I wanted to lay clear some of those complex processes in maybe a different way, because I think I've heard you say that this story needs to be told a lot of different ways in a lot of different methods and that sort of thing. And so I embraced my own knowledge and methods and timing when the timing was right to start doing that.
Fabulous. Well, how did Transform Shadows then come about?
Okay, so Transform Shadows is my vehicle, or my it's both my story right now and something that I see as a system for telling my story, and whether it lands with other people or not remains to be seen. But to get to that, what I do want to do is give people a glance at the complexity that I've worked to make clear as I've engaged in Transform Shadows. And for about a year, I've been getting ready to share my story. I launched it in November last year. And right before I launched my story, I had a lot of pages of what it meant to find my hunger drive. And I was reading them over really like the night before I was going to release my website. And I thought, what a mess. And I thought, who's going to want to read all this? I don't even want to read all this, but yet it was such important work for me in terms of synthesizing my own story. And I thought of what my supervisor at the time would have said, and he would have said, make a visual aid. So it was a Friday night, and I went to bed and I couldn't sleep. And I just kept thinking, make the visual aid, make the visual aid. And my mind was racing with Venn diagrams because I love Venn diagrams. And it seemed to be a very appropriate visual aid for telling my story. And so this is an overview of some of those complexities. I've got Eat, Win, Hungry in the center. It is deliberately in black and white because when you look at the bottom, this is how I've named some of the reflective processes that I have gone through. I name my shadows, I face my shadows, I work to understand my shadows, I fight my shadows, and I reframe my shadows with new learning or adjusting for my failures, which are ongoing as I try to keep the balance in more successes than failures. But I really needed something that helped me combat those distortions. And that was Eat, Win, Hungry, that is my task at hand. And everything else is really what impacts my ability to do that and some of the learning that I had to do. There are mindset pieces that are part of the reflection and action, which would be the outer circle. I think in a lot of those, I account for my personality because I made a plan around myself. I decided to treat myself as a student and be both teacher and student as I created a plan that I knew honestly was set up for my success. And then I had to understand the food addiction piece and the hunger drive, where I know you've done a lot of work in this. And I have color coded this red because the things that I have learned about food addiction in me are things that I really just can't engage in. And so it's, of course, not a new look at the use of the color red by any means, even in the plant-based food addiction, weight loss world, but it's an important color for me as well, in maybe a little bit different way. And then there's the green area, which are the things that I do need to do. And these are the actions I need to take around my food and my wellness in order to be able to eat when hungry. Of course, that intersects with the food addiction and the hunger drive world. And then there is this yellow area that is an important part too. And these are all sorts of things that impact my own hunger drive that other people have discussed and have written about and understand maybe differently than I do. But as I think about my own hunger drive, these are areas of caution, like
Yes.
What is it that I understand about myself and what are my realities that are part of this journey, and how do I operate around those realities and navigate them while keeping wellness and health in the center of it.
Yes.
And then finally, there's just a whole host of identity pieces that come into play when you go through a journey like this. For me, some of those were very stark because I went into COVID being very one size, and I came out of COVID being another size. And there was a real shift in how I navigated the world and how others perceived me. And there was learning to live according to my new habits and learning that were all part of that complex identity piece that can be a field of landmines as well. And so
Yes.
this really starts to get at that, making sense of the complexity. And when I laid this out, and then the next slide too, will take a little bit deeper look. But as an educator, I was almost breathless from an educational standpoint, because I felt like, no wonder this is so hard. And I think that's another reason why I ended up sharing my story, is because this is a real challenging problem, weight and success and failure around that. And it deserves treatment with dignity and with integrity and respect, which in so many cases, the tone or the false sense of scapegoating of in an individual's situation can be done very painfully.
Yes. What a like when you look at this, yeah, you're focused enough on the red, the green, and the yellow, but the identity issue is something that um, yeah, you had a kind of a unique journey there that I was super interested in, and that is that a lot of people, and there aren't many, but there are a lot of people. There's a number of people that I have known over the years that have lost a significant amount of weight, but they're doing it a little bit at a time in front of their family and friends and coalition and coworkers. And so so now they're down 20 pounds, people barely notice. Now they're down 40, people sort of notice. You know what I mean? Then they're down 60, and it's like, okay, people notice now, and now they've got some ego trap stuff starts to come up, and things start to change, and there could be some weird pressures that can be difficult. All of that, because your story was in COVID, it's unique. Like you quietly go about doing this thing, but then you have to face, when COVID ends, a reemergence of your professional environment, and everybody's, falling all over the floor, doesn't know what to make of it, don't know how to respond. I'm sure, and you'll have plenty to say about that, I'm sure, in the whole conversation about transform shadows, that you'll give to the world. But that was a unique journey, I'm sure. And so in some ways it was easier because you could quietly do it quietly on yourself. In some days it was way harder because when you faced it, you had to face tremendous social feedback all at once. And that must have been, for the lay person that's not very psychologically minded, they're like, hey, didn't you just feel like, Miss America walking in there and showing everybody? But really what it is that you're walking into a situation of all kinds of dynamics going completely sideways, and your own identity as you're trying to absorb who it is that you are to these people and what you mean to these people, and one of my favorite things about what you've ever said is, I wasn't broken and I wasn't fixed. I'm the same exact human being as who was always here before. Now everybody's treating me differently. And so what a journey. That's why I've been, kind of amazed and fascinated with not only your success in your journey, but also your studiousness at the process of trying to figure out and look and analyzing the features, but then also some of the uniqueness of your personal journey because of how and when it took place. Really amazing. Yeah.
And I will just say that, like navigating I called them landmines, went into COVID morbidly obese. And I came out, by the time I started interacting with people, beyond a few people, I was a healthy weight. And I didn't know how to be a healthy weight. And it's really confusing for people to have seen me. Number of people wondered if I had cancer or if there was something that was really negative behind that. And all of it was steeped in good intentions.
Yeah.
And I don't want to cast any sort of, negative light on anybody that I interacted with. And it was part of the process. And of course, in COVID too, we had a kind of a cold, long winter and we were masked. So I would see people in stores and I knew they didn't recognize me. And, sometimes I would say something to them and sometimes I wouldn't. And so that really was part of of the journey as well. And when I had a new situation, going into a new situation, it wasn't like, I can't wait to go into that situation. It was a
Right.
feeling of really mixed emotions and a lot of cognitive dissonance in those situations. And I'm pleased to say that, of course, they've worked out now, but
Yes.
they felt really big, and they felt like they could set me back at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All good. All right. Did you have other slides for us?
Yeah, I do want to just show people this, because this will be available on my website.
Mhm.
This is really going back to my teacher self. Here's my
Yeah.
syllabus.
Right. Right.
And this is really a deeper summary of the processes that I worked through. This is my journey. These are some of my things that I battled, that any one of these could be a course in and of itself. Because a lot of these things are so complicated to get figured out. And then there's the web, where they all interact and interplay with each other. And so I might be working through failure at one time, and also struggling with a certain aspect of my food addiction, so to speak. And so I'm sure that it's hard to read these, so I'll give just a really cliff note overview here. But in the food addiction and the hunger drive, I discuss really there's a list of all the trigger foods, which, when I talk about this being a multifaceted process of figuring myself out, in that multi-year, multifaceted process, I went through understanding layer after layer of trigger food. And I tend to have a highly reactive hunger drive to different foods. So some of the things that make plant-based eating very palatable for other people are things that serve as triggers for me, and that I do better without. Doesn't mean that I won't have things like processed spices. I can recover from processed spices. I don't have salt, oil, and sugar unless it's by accident or in an extreme situation, because that's something that I can't recover from, but I will have, fall off and have processed spices. Sometimes it just tastes good and that sort of thing. And then, things like nutritional yeast, which is a staple in plant-based food preparation, is something that I really do better without. Some of these things are dose related as well. And it's been, really layer by layer, understanding the cause-effect relationship between these foods and what happens in my body. And I can speak about that very differently now, because in so many ways, my hunger drive is an equation. It is a chemistry problem. It is not a willpower thing. It is not a shortcoming in my mind. It's not a shortcoming in my personality or who I am as a moral, ethical person. This is really about a physical process that takes place in my body, where trigger foods agitate my hunger drive and make it very difficult for me to stop eating. But when I remove them, my hunger drive works much differently. And so that's one aspect. And you've done a lot of your work is in this area. So is there anything you'd like to?
No, it's beautiful. It's good for people to know this. It's really good.
Yeah, and so then it's about, I think you used the phrase once, it's not just about what you take away, but it's what you replace it with. And so the green section here is what I eat and what I replace it with. And there's a list here that is something that I share pretty regularly on social media, that I have. I eat almost every day, including leafy green vegetables. I have beans every day. I have some sort of whole grain every day. I have raw vegetables every day. And I personally do have nuts and seeds. They don't cause me too many problems, except when I fall off, and then they are problematic, but they're nuts and seeds are part of my success plan, and they're part of my failure plan. So I recognize that they can be landmines for some people, but I do fine with them. And then fruits are really what keep me compliant in so many different ways. And there's a lot of influences there in terms of helping me find my balance. That is part of that equation. That I know I will feel better if I follow that equation in my eating. And then finally, in this weight and genetics part, I've got a lot of different concepts here that are things that are really important for people to understand about the hunger drive. Well, and I'm hypothesizing there because they've been really important for me to understand in my hunger drive. But understanding, the concept of weight storage and the role that biology and genetics play in that helps me understand why I may be different than someone who doesn't have to worry so much about obesity. Understanding the concepts of volume eating and nutritional diversity, nutrient density, calorie density, understanding a set point for weight. And then in my case, also understanding a set point for weight for quality of life has also been important. I talked a little bit about food reactivity and understanding binge eating in myself, exercise purges, which were part of my journey. And then something that hopefully we'll talk at another time about, because I think there's a lot of really important information that needs to get out there about anorexia. Mm-hmm. And I triggered anorexia in myself. And when I look at my whole history of understanding myself, when I figured this piece out about myself, my whole life made sense in a new way. And I could see it all over my life from my teen years through my current age. And so that's been an important learning piece too. And then no matter what area I'm struggling in the inner circles, there are things around the outer circles that, get at action and reflection, which are always part of this journey, and what it is people do to stay out of those patterns of inaction, to stay out of what you term the ego trap, and that we talked about earlier. So these are general concepts that no matter which part of the journey I'm on, they're always part of keeping myself on a successful path. And they transcend in many ways the specifics that I'm working with. And they encompass, if I'm making a change that is new to how I'm eating today, I'm going to draw on these same reflection and action pieces that I know benefit other people too in their journeys.
Grand. Yeah, very comprehensive.
Yeah.
This is, as someone who has talked, 1,000 interviews about these problems, and has sometimes gotten frustrated at the questions that I get, and then I try to articulate as best I can. Those slides are showing, that's kind of what I was trying to say, i.e., 50 factors. In other words, it's so if anybody's looking for the one quick trick or the one screw that you turn that's going to do this, the reason why you're seeing basically colossal failure in the Western world on this problem is because it's more complicated than people are appreciating. And so this is great that we're getting to now see this written down in a way that I've never seen it written down. In other words, really comprehensively analyzed as to how many little pieces there are of this, because there's a lot of little pieces, lots of them. Very good.
And
go ahead.
I just add one piece of that. So that was created really right before I launched my story publicly. And even though this was all in my writing, when I put it in a visual aid and I looked at that and I thought about what I knew about the complex processes at place that were part of that journey, all of those complex processes that are part of that visual are really overwhelming.
Yes.
And validating at the same time.
Yes.
No wonder it is so hard to do.
No question. All good. Well, I'll tell you what, given the fact that we now have learned that it is way more complicated than we think, we are fortunate to have you as I like to call, there's specific people in my life along my journey as a clinician that I like to call them talking lab rats. It's like, hey, I've got one that is going through something and they can actually articulate what's going on inside of them. This is really important. So you're a fabulous talking lab rat on this problem. And so very few people have gone through a transformation really as quickly as you did. You know, I mean, when we say quickly, it was a year process or whatever it is, but that is a phenomenal transformation in a year. And I'm sure that people milling around you thought, well, bariatric surgery or God knows what, she did. It's like, no, this actually took place by someone seizing control with an exceptionally healthy diet and then following through diligently for 365 days. Like, a quote comes to mind. I don't know who it's attributed to, but the quote is that people massively overestimate what they can accomplish in a day, and they massively underestimate what they can accomplish in a year.
That's good.
And your story is a spectacular demonstration of that truth. People want so badly to lose the weight, and they'll quote do anything, but they won't do something diligently and simple for a year. They want to do something dramatic and somehow after 2 or 3 weeks or 4 or 5 days see big results. And your story is one of a tremendous steady methodology where you just kept aiming at the right place on the compass over and over again, and then we watched this happen. So but knowing that we understand it's complex, and that's a great value of what it is that you're sharing with the world. But if you had some advice for people that was some of the simplest things that we could say about where they would begin or what their struggles, how we might approach their struggles, what would be a few ideas that you would give them as takeaway?
That's a really great question. And I think I'm going to answer it in terms of some concepts. And so the first concept that I'm going to answer that with is honesty, because I mentioned the role of distortions around weight, and they're certainly part of my journey. And I've talked to enough people who have also experienced some of those distortions as well. And some of those are justifications that go on as part of the addictive process. Others are denial mechanisms, and some of them are just wanting something else to be true, and it really isn't. And so I think facing shadows honestly, and I always say name your shadows first. I name my shadows and faced my shadows. That has been part of it. But being honest about what it is that I have to deal with is really important. So that's the first piece. The second piece is curiosity. And learning is really important in this journey. And I think sometimes that learning is centered out of desperation and despair and a real negative lens. But there's a lot that can be really exciting about this learning that takes place. And the learning can lead to success in a way that is different than many of those other pathways that are out there. And so being curious also helps me uproot some of the social stigma that might be around this particular topic, and learning about that in a new way. Practicality is going to be another one of the pieces of advice that I give to people, because this is really not, again, about personal shortcomings. And the practical advice that I would give people is to see your hunger drive as part of who you are. From a holistic standpoint, yes, it's important to understand the different facets and dimensions of it, but my skin is white. I go in the sun and I sunburn within 20 minutes. I put either clothes over it or sunscreen on to prevent my skin from getting sunburned. I cut my fingernails to take care of that aspect of my life. I have short thumbs. I don't really need to take care of them at all, but they're part of who I am. And I make sure that I buy size 8.5 or 9 shoes. And those are the things that I do that are part of the practical care that I give myself. And so the other thing that I want to say about my advice around weight and health and a journey like this is think of yourself practically. And the hunger drive shouldn't be something that requires shame and embarrassment to talk about. It should be something that we can talk about just like we would talk about taking care of other facets of our humanness. And that really would be a piece of advice that I think is very important for people. And finally, then the other piece of advice would be around your own agency and your ability to make the changes. And if we go back to that concept of the epic hero, you have to be the hero of your own journey, and you have to face those larger than life struggles that feel like they require sometimes superhuman energy, and find ways through them. And when you fail, find ways to recover from them quickly and reframe what it is that you know and where you're going, and continue the journey in spite of failure, because failure will be part of it. It's part of my journey, and never losing sight of that agency that no one can do this work for you. Support helps. People can help you find this, but you are the one that it comes down to in the end. And so being the hero of your own story is super important.
That is beautiful. I have to tell you, not to disparage anyone, because I have compassion for what a problem human beings have caused for themselves. You know, that many people will not be able to solve this, and they suffer with the consequences of not being able to solve it. But one of the interesting components of some people not solving it is that there are people that will get knowledgeable and they will stick their toe in the water, and then they get intimidated and they have little stretches of success, and then they fail, and then they're intimidated, and then they quit, and then they keep dancing around the fire, listening and theoretically learning, but not doing it. And the notion of an epic journey, and I when you talk about that, I think about climbing a mountain that is climbable. Like it is, it's not going to be easy, but I can remember doing that a few times, when I was a younger person. And I didn't do mountain climbing gear. I'm just talking about hiking to the top of something that takes some serious effort to get there. And it's very much like this. Like if you slip on some gravel and you fall and you hurt your knee, it's like, okay, that shouldn't stop you. So you had a little miniature failure. That you can still get up. And you can still get up that mountain. And at the end of the day, nobody else is going to carry you up that mountain. And if you're going to earn the self-confidence and self-esteem and the achievement of actually getting to the top of that mountain, you're going to have to do it. And the beautiful thing is Nobody will stop you. There's not, there are inducements all around you. There are people saying you can't do it or you should do it easily. So why is it so hard? And why are you failing? Like there's all kinds of peanut gallery around you and all kinds of advice. But at the end of the day, if you know the right direction to go, all that it actually takes is you to do it. That's not easy to do, but your concept here of agency being the final component is that the beautiful thing is we don't need a miracle. We don't need something to reality to alter and an incurable cancer to be somehow cured. We actually can fix this problem. Not easy, unbelievably important, difficult, but I like how you have put the educator's hat on and helped organize so many components of this for us. I think that people are going to find your approach. Many people are sort of systematic people are going to find this to be very, very interesting. How can people find you, find out about you? Tell us about that.
So I'm going to share my screen one more time and just give you a little glimpse of what I'm doing so that you can find me if you want. Transform Shadows is what I created. And it was really important for me to have something that felt like what it is. And so this feels accurate. I'm not fixed. Those are the shadows, but transform is the action. What are the actions that happen as part of that? And then, for my own self, these are some of those actions: the name, shadows, face, understand, fight, and reframe. Any order, any time. Is kind of the way I look at it, because it's a fluid process. And to capture that fluid process, I have an Instagram and Facebook account as well as a website. Some of the themes that you will see is that when I eat in color, I live in color. And that is probably the biggest broad endorsement of this way of living that I can give, is that once you get through that withdrawal process and get on the other side, it's pretty fantastic. And this is what it feels like. I eat in color and I live in color. But to do that, I'll have to engage in shadow boxing. And this is a slide from my Instagram, Facebook account where I did some cooking. I like weightlifting, so that's part of my work. And then I'm trying to stay active in various ways. And this is my dorky self wearing my weighted vest on a walk. So that's how you can find me. I like to focus on what I can do rather than what I look like, and being able to do things that I never really thought possible is a message I'd like to leave people with, because I've heard other people leave this message as well. And there are people like us out there who can do this battle. And I will say, in my own battle, I fell off for 11 years. And even if you have failed in the past, keep coming at it and think about the actions that you can do and the actions you can take when you get a little bit further in your journey, if you have limitations that are at play because of like for me, at my weight was at play. I can do things now that I couldn't do then because of the physical differences. And so defying my own expectations has been part of my journey. And so I share a little bit about that as well. And I have an Instagram at transform_shadows, Facebook at transform shadows, transformshadows.com has my blog, as well as some pretty deep resources. I like to think of myself as creating 3 a.m. resources when you're alone with your choices, and you're not looking for the gimmicks, but you're looking for the real deal. That's the type of resource that I've been striving to create. And then there's a YouTube channel as well, Transform Shadows. I would direct you to the 7-minute Transform Shadows video. That's 7 minutes, which is a little bit more about my story, situated in concepts that might help people take on a journey themselves of this kind.
Fabulous. I know that you're an educator. You've done all kinds of counseling in your life around educational processes, and this is an educational process. Do you counsel this now, or do you have your own kind of way of going about trying to help people?
Yeah, so I think my own way of going about people is really thinking about it broadly and systemically, like I am, as well as the ongoing nature. I post 3 times a day, generally on my Instagram and Facebook. A lot of it is things that I have to relearn all the time in order to succeed. I'm relearning the same lessons. I'm thinking the same things. I'm drawing upon the same truths of who I am and what it is that I have to battle in any given moment. And so I try to really capture that fluidity of the process. And there's educational coaching that is very intentional in that ongoing process as well. And I do have a link on my website where you can sign up for coaching as well. I do have very limited time slots because of the nature of my work, but I do some coaching as well.
Fabulous. What a great resource to have. I'm happy to know that, because there's plenty of folks that could definitely use, some of your wisdom. This is fabulous. All I can say is thank you for having me. It's great to be able to hear, more sort of in a much broader conversation about so many different things that have gone into your thinking and your putting this all together.
Well, I want to thank you for being here, because your knowledge has been an important part of the synthesis I have done in my own knowledge. And I know your work has helped thousands of people. People can look at comments on different things that you've done and see how much people are grateful for the insights and the knowledge that you share as well. And as we think about some of those concepts, I hope you'll join me again sometime, because I feel like we've scratched the surface of some really important ideas that could be probed much more deeply in ways that might be helpful for people as they wrangle with these complexities.
Fabulous. Thank you, Dr. Lyon. Great pleasure to talk to you. And I hope we could talk again.